Whenever I'm in America, I ask myself the same question over and over. How is it possible to have so much choice, yet feel so unsatisfied? Turns out there's a guy who wrote a book all about it. I went to the University of California, Berkeley, to meet Barry Schwartz, world-renowned psychologist and author of The Paradox of Choice. This is the InnerView. Barry Schwartz, isn't freedom and choice a great thing? Isn't it better to have more choice, more autonomy to choose what you want?
So you've asked a very complicated question.
That's what I do.
Freedom is a great thing. And you know, you don't have freedom unless you have real options, real choices. And what we have, Western democratic societies have come to believe is that freedom is the highest good, and the way you enhance freedom is by increasing choice, and you can't have too much of it. Every option I add to your life enhances your freedom and enhances your autonomy. Nobody's forcing you to do this work rather than that work. Nobody's forcing you to wear these clothes rather than those clothes, or to eat this food rather than that food. Every new option adds to our freedom. And what's the mistake that people made in assuming this is that there's no question that choice is good, but it didn't occur to anyone that there could be too much of a good thing, that a point would be reached where adding additional options actually made people worse off. It paralyzed them. It didn't free them because they couldn't decide how to decide. And if they did manage to decide, they'd be shaking their heads, convinced that they'd made the wrong decision. So they would either end up unable to choose or dissatisfied with the choices they made. And how could anyone possibly have anticipated this when the world offered very limited options? As options exploded, all of a sudden we got a new kind of problem in rich democratic societies, at least.
So we're biologically suited to fewer choices, and we find more contentment in those fewer choices.
Correct.
And when we have this explosion of choices, in a consumer sense, infinite varieties of toothpaste, chocolate bars, avocados, but also other things, perhaps.
Oh, absolutely.
Jobs, sexual partners.
Yep.
What's going on with our psychology? Dissatisfaction, a bamboozled element to it. Is there a way to actually find the balance? Where's the threshold?
So there have only been a handful of studies that tried to ask the question, what's the right number? And the results suggest that the right number is 8 or 10 options. But I caution you not to take this too seriously, because the studies involve choosing really trivial things, like a pen, a ballpoint pen, or a gift box. And it's, I think, a real mistake to assume that there's the right amount of choice in every domain, and it's the same amount. And so what I tell people who are in the world of commerce, who want to know how many different versions of our product should we make, I say, there's no way to know this in advance. The way you find that out is you do the research. Where's the point where you start confusing, frustrating, and disappointing people rather than liberating them? And that's the point where you should stop diversifying your product line. But there's no right answer, single right answer to that question.
So yeah, can we agree that there's a certain level of poverty or people might be in a certain level of poverty and view this argument and think, first world problem, I don't know what you're talking about, right? I need food, I need electricity, running water. So all of this doesn't really apply to
that. Is correct.
So it's more about having a certain baseline of a society that's functioning, having a certain level of affluence, and we've designed a world that is confusing us and paralyzing us with the infinite variety of choices that we have.
That's exactly right. And the thing is, it's not simply that we are causing people to suffer when they ought to be delighted with their lives by adding options. We're also wasting massive amounts of resources. You know, what's the point of having 200 different kinds of genes to choose from? Presumably the point is to enhance the satisfaction of the people who are buying genes.
Yeah.
And it takes resources, material resources, to produce and stock and ship and sell these 200 different kinds of genes. And if no one's benefiting, then those resources are wasted. And if it turns out not only is no one benefiting, but people are actually suffering, then you're throwing resources at people and making them worse off.
And the people creating the genes are quite possibly working in sweatshops. I mean, so
the people who are actually making the genes are almost certainly working in sweatshops.
Yeah.
And you know, you could probably pay them a little bit more if you didn't feel the need to make 200 different kinds of genes, and their standard of living would improve. But the idea that we devote so much resource to something that does not make people better off is sort of heartbreaking. And it makes them worse off, and sometimes in very serious ways. I think one of the reasons why we have a younger generation, age, I don't know, 13 to 25-ish, so anxious, so depressed, so unhappy, so uncertain about what path their future should take, is that thanks to the internet, we have made every conceivable way of living available to contemplate, and that makes it unbelievably hard for people to decide which path is the path that they should choose.
Even if that way of living is not necessarily, that perceived way of living is not necessarily an accurate reflection of what's going on. So a young girl scrolling through Instagram has an idea of how somebody else might be living. That might be fake.
Right.
As well. So whether that's real or not, what's it doing to young people?
No, and the extraordinary thing, you know, if it's fake, obviously it's destructive, because it looks like everyone on earth is living a better life than you are.
Yeah.
And so you're asking yourself, and we do this all the time, when you ask yourself, how am I doing? The way you answer that is by comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah.
And if the other people you're comparing yourself to seem to have a life full of fun and excitement and beautiful clothes and what have you, then the answer to your question, how am I doing, is your life sucks. So when it's inaccurate, it obviously is harmful. But the less obvious point is that even when it's accurate, it's harmful, because it creates this kind of uncertainty in people about which clothes they should buy, which parties they should go to, which college they should go to, which kind of career they should pursue, because there are just so many options, and they're operating with very incomplete information, and they feel as though somehow they should know, but they don't know how to know. And these are often, you know, what genes you buy is not a big deal, but where you go to school or what career you pursue is a very big deal. And not having any confidence that you know how to make those decisions is really debilitating to people. So as I'm sure you know, there's been an explosion of serious psychopathology in young people. And John Haidt and some of his collaborators have collected some very impressive data, impressive from my point of view. This is still controversial, that you can sort of tie this explosion to the explosion of social media.
Yeah, I've seen that. You have the graph going going along, and then it just spikes with the algorithm tweaked on Facebook or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's even more, it's very specific. It's when Facebook introduced the like button.
Right, that was it, yeah.
Then the social media exploded, and so did anxiety, depression, and suicide attempt. It was
especially among young girls, which is...
Especially among young girls, who I suspect are doing more social comparison than the boys are, and know themselves less well, you know. What could be harder than being a 12-year-old in a world where it seems as though everything is possible? By the time you're 16, you've maybe sorted through some of life's options and you don't feel quite as uncertain.
Yeah.
But as a 12 or 13-year-old going through puberty, everything is possible. I don't know how to choose. I can't talk to my parents about the most important stuff that's going on in my life. It's a catastrophe. So it's not a shock. And surely everyone thought that the social media was just going to be this unambiguously positive enrichment of people's lives. Well, it's not unambiguously positive. It certainly has an upside, but it's devastating. The unanswered question is whether this is the sort of thing that people learn how to handle. So if you were, you know, a 12-year-old a decade ago, it just sort of got thrown at you and you had no tools. Well, maybe today's 12-year-olds have some of the tools because they are, as it were, digital natives, you know, they're social media natives, and it won't have the kind of impact on them as it had on their older siblings. It's possible. People are adaptable, and we may learn how to cope and continue to extract what's good without paying this heavy psychological price. But there's no guarantee that we can adapt to this, and it's causing real suffering.
The choices that we make and this wrestling nature of us having more choices but being unhappy, it's not only about consumer goods, it's also about who we associate with, where we study, what kind of jobs we decide to take. Also, what beliefs, especially in the social media age, what beliefs we claim to profess. Tell me a little bit more about that and how the choice of what to say and how to define yourself and how to signal to others who you are. Tell me what's going on with that and how that ties into your work.
Sure. So with a former student of mine named Nathan Sheik, we started to do some research to explore this possibility. If there are only two kinds of genes to choose from, then the genes you choose don't tell the world much about you because there isn't enough variety. You know, are you a Lee's person or a Levi's person hardly defines you. When there are 2,000 kinds of genes to choose among, even if it doesn't change your understanding, it changes the world's understanding. Now, when I see the fancy stitching on your behind, telling me that you're wearing an expensive pair of jeans, it says something to me, not just about your taste in clothing, but about who you are. And so large choice sets make the choices that we make statements about who our identity, what we care about, what's important to us, who we are as people. And the consequence of that is that all of a sudden relatively trivial choices stop being trivial. You know, what jeans you buy is a pretty trivial thing, but statements to the world about who you are and what you care about is not a trivial thing. And you know, what arts and culture you consume says something to the world about
what's your profile picture. What's your
profile
picture?
picture?
In the past, maybe people had bumper stickers. There's still a lot of bumper stickers in the US. Right, we were driving through, but digitally and otherwise, what's your bumper sticker?
Yep.
Right.
What's your bumper sticker? What's your pattern of likes?
Right.
You know, every choice you make in that regard is a statement to the world about identity. And once that becomes clear, every choice you make becomes a consequential choice. You know, maybe even what toothpaste you buy in a grocery store becomes a consequential choice, because some of them may be more natural than
Right.
others. So are you somebody who cares about natural products as opposed to sort of artificial products? Are you somebody who cares about the waste from these products polluting the environment, or are you not such a person?
Or maybe you don't really care, but you need to be seen to be
You
caring.
need to signal that you
Yeah.
care. No, that's exactly right. In fact, there's this, what is it called, green mail, where companies increasingly take this position at no cost to them that they're concerned about the environment, because it establishes their sort of moral righteousness, and that attracts consumers. And they do it very, very cleverly in areas that really have almost no impact on their bottom line.
Right.
So they get all this free halo around them without having to absorb any actual cost.
Yeah.
And you feel good because you buy green products.
Right.
And they don't tell you who's making those products and that they're making 15 cents an hour or anything like that.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like we can choose not to have the jeans we buy be a statement about us. The world simply pushes us so that the jeans we buy are a statement about us, because we could buy these jeans or these jeans or these jeans or these jeans. Could eat in this restaurant or this restaurant or this restaurant or this restaurant. On Netflix there are 5,000, 15,000, who knows how many movies that you could watch. So all of a sudden the way you divert yourself in an evening is a statement about what you value. And in the old days, when there were 2 TV stations, what you watched was not such a statement about what you value.
You say the world sort of pushes us. In this modern world, all things being equal, in, say, industrialized countries with a certain level of prosperity, do we actually have free will?
That, as people like to say, that answering that question is above my pay grade. The whole point of research in psychology, and I've spent my life doing research in psychology, is to try to identify how much of what we think is freely chosen by us is actually caused by influences from the environment. We're nudged in one direction or another without realizing that we're being nudged in one direction or another, and we say, well, I ordered the chicken because I really feel like chicken tonight. And you didn't realize that the way in which the chicken dish was described was designed to entice you into ordering the chicken. Right. You think, well, this decision came from me internally, from what I want and what I know about myself. So I pushed myself to that decision, when in fact the environment pulled you. And that's what psychology is about, finding the things that cause our behavior. And every time you find a cause, that's one additional piece of free will that's been chipped away. And of course, advertisers have been doing this for 100 years. There's a famous guy in advertising who said once, half of the advertising we do is useless. The problem is we don't know which half. And that's changed, because market research techniques have gotten much more sophisticated. So I think nowadays the marketers know how to nudge people in one direction or another, and how to do it in a way that that preserves people's sense that they are autonomous decision makers. I
wonder, in the past, was it more clear cut, especially when it came to like politics, right? You have an authoritarian dictator and clear propaganda, and they're trying to brainwash you, and sometimes just by sheer weight of numbers, like the amount of airtime or whatever that somebody's getting, influences people at the polls, even if they're free, right? So you had that, but things were clear. People trying to push a message to you were clearer. Is it far more difficult in this day and age with everything being splintered into consumer culture, is it far more difficult to be able to recognize whether you're being twisted or bent or manipulated?
I think the answer is it's more difficult, but I don't know that it's because there are so many more options and things are splintered. I think it may be that the sort of tools that opinion shapers have developed are more subtle and sophisticated. So you can be influenced without realizing that you're being influenced. Economists assume that people are rational agents, calculating costs and benefits and making the choices that maximize their welfare or their utility or something. And there is certainly a part of us that's that way, but most of us, and the work of Daniel Kahneman and his collaborator Amos Tversky, which won Kahneman the Nobel Prize, is really all about this. There are other influences on our behavior that affect us below the level of awareness. So,
such as?
The way in which an object is described. Whether you present an object, a potential object of choice, in a set with other objects that are obviously inferior. If I present you with 3 options and 2 of them are obviously inferior, not only will you choose the superior one, you'll also give it a higher rating than you would if there weren't these 2 inferior options. And so what you're doing implicitly is you're saying not how good is this in an absolute sense, but how good is this compared to the alternatives. And so depending on which alternatives I put in front of you, I can really manipulate your evaluation of the target alternative. So that kind of stuff happens. People don't realize that it's happening. I mean, I know this research, I teach this, I've written about it, and that doesn't mean it doesn't have exactly the same effect on me when I'm in the grocery store or the clothing store that it has on people who don't know the research. So these are automatic processes that operate below the level of awareness, and they deliver answers to questions like what decision should I make before we've even asked ourselves the question. So we start to say, okay, which college should I go to? And I'm going to start thinking about it now. And we think we're starting from neutral. But in fact, we've already been pushed in various directions beneath our level of awareness. Now, you can overcome these automatic influences. You can ultimately make a rational decision.
By not being on the internet and by closing your eyes whenever you go outside.
To some degree. I mean, it turns out it matters a lot when kids in the US routinely go on college visits. The most important effect of college visits depends on the weather when you visit the campus.
Oh, wow.
You know,
it's a nice day here at UC Berkeley. I might sign up.
You know, you're about to spend 4 years and $250,000 in college, and you choose a college because it's 70 degrees and sunny. And when I say, why did you choose that college? You say, well, it has a great biology program, or they have an excellent football team, and I love intercollegiate sports, or 1,000 other things.
So you post hoc rationalize it with a whole lot of other reasons, but actually it was something that was done emotionally, but you're not willing to admit it.
It's not that you're not willing to, you don't know it.
Oh, you don't know,
You know, I could try to convince you. I could say, look, here's a study that was done, and it showed that people give much higher ratings to colleges they visit on sunny days than on cloudy days. You think you're special? You think it doesn't happen to you? And chances are what the person would say is, yes, I do think I'm special. I'm rational. I'm not going to be influenced by trivial things like that.
What's the saying? First they convert, then they read the scriptures. Right? So like it's done. It's a done deal.
Exactly.
Your brain finds reasons, you make up a story.
So, you know, you can try, if you learn a lot about these influences that we're not aware of, you can try to neutralize them. You can try to present options in as neutral an environment as possible so that people actually are starting from zero rather than starting with a bias in one direction or another. But you can't control the world. So, you just have to, if you know a lot about bias, then what you probably do, the advice I give people is, don't just do something, sit there. And the reason is that these automatic processes are fast. And so before we've even really started thinking about what should I choose, these automatic processes have already pushed us. And so if you act quickly, thinking that you know what you want and what will satisfy you, likely you're going to be driven by these automatic processes, most of which you're unaware of. And they won't always lead you astray, but they will sometimes lead you astray. So if you sit there, then you give your more deliberative, conscious, rational processes a chance to participate in the decision and maybe change your mind about what it is that's the right school to go to or the right restaurant to go to or what have you. And so it seems ridiculous to say don't just do something, sit there. But the idea is to give your rationality a chance to catch up with these automatic processes that are influencing you, though you don't know they're influencing you. So, it's not the case that taking a long time to make decisions automatically means you're going to make better decisions, but it helps a lot if you give your best analytical tools a chance to be part of the conversation. And making rapid decisions almost guarantees that your best analytical tools will not be part of the conversation.
Love it. I don't have any more time, unfortunately, so I've got to wrap.
Well, you have to give me my own show.
Yeah, why not? Okay, we'll get in touch. Barry Schwartz, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful questions.